Welcome to Entanglement Radio, transcendent talk for the conscious mind. Join us for inspiring conversations with visionaries in spiritual science, new thought, and conscious healing. Explore the potential and infinite possibilities of what it means to be human with some of the best guests in radio. At Entanglement Radio, it is all connected. Now, here is your host, Angela Levesque, on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Good day. You're listening to Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque right here on iom.fm. I'm coming to you live today from the beautiful foothills of the Rocky Mountains here in Boise, Idaho. And today we are lifting the veil on mankind's origin, purpose, and destiny with NASA engineer David Gaggin. And he has such a great way of taking some of these topics and being able to convey them in a way that people can hear it. And it's not too woo-woo and it's not too research-based. It's somewhere right in the middle. So I think you're really going to enjoy our conversation. Next week, I have the amazingly beautiful, wonderful blue-collar goddess, Sarah Nash, on the program. She is actually host of Radio Namaste, which you can find on Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern right here on the OMTimes Radio Network. If you have not checked out her show, you absolutely should. She is also the founder of the White Light Express, and we are going to be talking about the power of positive, focused intention. So really great topic, and she's just an amazing lady. And like I said, check out Radio Namaste at 3 p.m. on Thursdays on iom.fm. She also does something, in listening to her show many times, she also does something pretty cool that I am going to borrow from her. So I just want to say for all of the listeners out there, I am going to be offering every month a free intuitive reading with myself. And at the first show of every month, I will be naming the winner. So all you need to do is hashtag Entanglement Radio on your Twitter account, hashtag Entanglement Radio, and I will keep track over the month. And one lucky listener every month will win an intuitive reading from myself. So there's only 2 weeks left in May, so I will be listing the winner at the first week in June. So you have a very good chance because this is a short month because we are just starting this contest. So hashtag Entanglement Radio. If you need to get a hold of me at any time during the week, you can email me at angela@hestiahealth.com. You can find me on Facebook and on Twitter at hestiahealth.com, as well as Entanglement Radio. I love to hear from listeners and hear ideas and feedback and, wow, that show really connected with me. I love to hear all that stuff, so please do. As I said, today we are lifting the veil. One of the things that I always found kind of interesting is that we always think that this time is the most advanced. Like with this idea of progress and continually increasing our technology, we've somehow really equated advanced technology with advanced civilization. And I think that there has been civilizations in the past who perhaps were more advanced in some ways. Maybe they didn't have computers or the internet, but they really focused on what I think is important in the aspects of our spirituality. And, we had ancient philosophers and mystics who used to spend all of their time just looking up at the stars, just asking those big questions. Why are we here? And now we're just asking questions like, what's going to happen next week on the Kardashians, and who's wearing what on the red carpet. And to me, it just seems like we really have to take our focus from the external and start bringing it back to the internal. And to me, that is one of the pinnacle or the hallmarks of an advanced society, is a society that knows their inner world just as well as they know the outer world. So we are going to talk about all of that, why we are here, all of that good stuff with my guest today. David Gaggin has a BS in math and electrical engineering. He then went on to receive a master's degree in electrical engineering. He is subsequently spent 9 years as a senior executive with the U.S. Army, directing avionics and command and control R&D. During this period, he also directed Joint Army-NASA laboratories at Langley and Ames and was the U.S. Army's representative on the NATO Advisory Group for Aerospace R&D. Taking advantage of his extensive training, he has voraciously studied all major religions and their origins. He's read texts like the Book of the Dead. He's read Vedic texts. And he studied Eastern and Western philosophers. We'll talk more about that in a minute with him. And as an engineer, he has studied the sciences, including quantum mechanics, relativity, cosmology, anthropology, and archaeology. Eventually, Gaggin's extensive research began to coalesce into the answers that made sense to his scientifically trained mind. He began to apply the principles of what he learned to his own life. Inspired by the results and wanting to pass along his understandings, he compiled his learnings into the groundbreaking book, The Endless Journey, A Unique Perspective on Mankind's Origin, Purpose, and Ultimate Destiny. So with that, I feel honored and blessed to welcome David Gaggin to the program. How are you doing, David?
I'm doing great, Angela. Thanks for having me on.
Well, I'm going to ask you right off the bat that we just need to make sure you talk as close to your mic as possible without, so just because I can tell you're a little bit quiet. But okay, so you've had this incredibly extensive background, scientific background, academic background, as well as all of this study in, ancient wisdom and ancient teachings. So do you feel that we really do need to bring the science and the spirituality together in order to really understand why we're here?
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about it, Angela. When we get it right, when we truly understand what's going on, science, religion, and philosophy are all going to tell the same story. They might tell it from a slightly different perspective, but it's all got to be consistent. There's only one answer out there. And once we get it, we'll get it all the way across.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about today is, so like I said in my introduction, that you have an ability to be able to convey this information in a way that I think isn't too woo-woo and ethereal and out there, and isn't overly caught up in, all the research language and all of that you found kind of this middle ground. So I want to talk a little bit about where did you find most of this information? Did you channel it? Was it all just through research? Was it already available to us and we just didn't know where to look?
Yeah, it's all available. Everything that I have put in the book is available to anybody. The problem that I found, and everybody will, is each one of these disciplines has their own language. They have their own terminology. So you have to go understand what they mean by various things. And so it's a long time effort to make that happen. But once you do it, then you can start seeing that things things really do make sense. And there's a lot of information out there. Of course, there's a lot of information that's not right too. So you need to have pretty good critical skills to challenge everything that you read. And a lot of things that I read, I didn't understand them the first time that I read them. And they seemed to make sense, but I really didn't get it. So I take that, whatever it was, the volume, whatever I was reading, and I'd stick it back in the bookshelf and I'd leave it alone for, maybe a few years. And then when I went back, having built up a broader knowledge, I was able to understand it. And it took a long time. It took me many, many years to try to get it to come together. But I found it a fascinating trip, and I got an awful lot out of it. And when it finally started to come together, I was somewhat amazed. I really didn't think that the answers would be so straightforward and in front of us.
Well, what do your colleagues think of this work that you've been doing and the blending or the bridging of science and spirituality? Are most of them on board and saying, wow, we've been looking up at the stars just as much as you have, and we've had the same questions? Or have they been like, David, what are you doing?
I think I get all different answers on it. Some of them are absolutely on board. Some of them say, I believe in scientific atheism and so on and so forth. So it's not for everybody. It's everybody will get it when their time comes, but you have to be a seeker. You have to. Knowledge is not going to be bestowed on us. You have to go get it. It requires reason. It requires effort, and you have to go get it. And once you're willing to do that, and those of my colleagues that have really enjoyed it, and they're taking it to the next level. And the ones that aren't are waiting and patiently doing their own thing. So it's all up to the individual.
So do you think that there's purpose in the fact that we have to seek it out, that it's not just, readily available to anyone to just Google?
Well, I do think it is. I think there's a huge purpose. I think, I think we're spiritual beings. We've lived for not ever, but for a long, long time, and we will live for forever. And our purpose is to gain knowledge, but also our purpose is to be unique. And if everybody was just given all of the information at once, nobody would be unique. Everybody would be a clone, and that doesn't seem to fit in to the scheme of the universe. So the fact that we have to go out and we learn this knowledge through experiences, and all of our experiences are different. There's no two beings that have ever had identical experiences. I mean, even if you go to the show with somebody, a musical, you'll have a different experience than the person sitting next to you, just because of your background. And then if you add that all together over the eons and the many lives we live, you come up with very unique beings. And the importance of people being unique is that we provide a unique perspective to the universe. So it all works. It all seems to work hand in hand.
Well, when we get back, I want to talk about some of the terms like universal consciousness, the difference between a spirit and a soul, and then talk about a simple model of how we can fit into the philosophy you described. So we'll talk about that more when we return here on Entanglement Radio.
Conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Do you want to be a better communicator? Do you want to better connect with the important people in your life? Do you want to enrich your relationships? If so, join me, Matthew Cooper, on the Positive Control System Show every Wednesday evening at 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time on OMTimes Radio. I'll meet you there.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. Have you ever wondered how to change your love paradigm? The secret key is finding a love partnership, not just a regular connection. How do you find these? Through conscious relationships. Ascending Hearts Dating is a dating site for people like you that believes in second chances and a different type of spiritual connection. Try Ascending Hearts for free today at ascendinghearts.com and change your love paradigm. Ascending Hearts, the premier dating community for the spiritually awake.
Know what to do, just can't figure out how to fit it all into your busy life? It doesn't have to be that way. Hi, I'm Alan Baisberg from Seamless Life. Join me every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio and learn the how of conscious living. Let me and my guests help make your life seamless.
The cutting edge of conscious radio. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
We are back, and you're listening to Entanglement Radio right here on the OMTimes Radio Network. My guest again today is David Gaggin, and he has written a book called The Endless Journey, a unique perspective on mankind's origin, purpose, and ultimate destiny. If you want to find out more about my guest, you can go to davidgaggin.com. That's David, Gaggin.com. So let's get into some of the nitty-gritty here. So you talk a lot about universal consciousness. And consciousness is one of those words that, depending if you're talking from a psychological perspective, if you're talking from neuroscience, it has a completely different meaning than what you're trying to get at. So let's define a few terms here. What are we talking about when you say universal consciousness?
Universal consciousness, from my perspective, is really all of the beings. It's an accumulation of all of the spiritual beings that exist now and have ever existed. Because once you become a spiritual being, you don't go out of existence. So it's one organization, one being that can function as a single being, or it can function as individual beings. It's kind of like a computer network, which can work together as a central system, or it can work as a distributed system, depending on the desires of the network itself. But it's us. It's the spirits that make it up, and we work together as a single entity. It's if you're a religious person, you call it God, because it is an intelligence that supersedes, transcends the cosmos, and quite frankly is embedded within the cosmos as it is embedded within you and I.
And did it have a beginning, or has it always been?
It had a beginning. There had to be one spirit that came into existence somewhere along the line. And there's a number of mystic beliefs, and maybe the most interesting one, and I can't tell you if it's true or not, but it's certainly interesting, is that it's one of the ancient mystic beliefs, is that it's the Trinity, and it's not the Trinity that we know of in Christianity, but it's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And they thought that the Father, which was really the Father Mother, was chaos. It was the void that was in existence for forever, we assume. And then the Son, which was the first, which we might call God, I guess, but not really. He was the very first spirit that by some miracle appeared. And then he was able to divide himself, he or she, it had no gender, was able to divide itself, and all of the other spirits that we are part of, and the rest of the universal consciousness, that's the Holy Ghost. That's all of the other spirits that exist. So that's a myth. I obviously wasn't there. I can't tell you that it's true or false. But it's a concept that I could see. I don't handle infinity real well, and from something like that, it lays out a single miracle as opposed to many miracles, and I could sort of see where that might have happened. But anyway, that's the best that I could get out of all the ancient wisdom as far as how it really started.
And we still have the problem, whether it's the Big Bang or what we still have the problem that there was still something that initiated it that is still a mystery.
Right. You have the biggest question that I would have is where did chaos come from? Where did the void? Because the void wasn't really a void, right? Space is not a void; it's full of energy. And the question is, where did that come from? And there is nothing in any myth anywhere along the line that I've ever run into that explained that. I think it's just probably unknown.
Well, and I love having these conversations, and I don't know if you connected to what I said in my monologue, that people used to sit around forever thinking about these big questions of life. And philosophers would spend their whole career working and mulling over these things, and it just seems that we've gotten so distracted and put our focus so much on the external that we've completely lost sight of what's going on internally.
Well, I agree with that, and I do think, certainly Plato and Socrates and a lot of the Greek philosophers were heavily into this. But, we have advantages that they didn't have back then. The fact that, we have an internet, we have so much information that we can be tied into things that they weren't able to be tied into. So we really do have a lot of advantages. I mean, they were incredibly bright people. But we have a lot of advantages going for us. It's just a matter of bringing these things together and trying to understand them. There are an awful lot of smart people that have lived, and awful lot of them have known bits and pieces of it, and it's just trying to pull it all together.
And I think that that's what your book does really well, actually, is take all of these things, because, doing this show, I've read quite a few books. Almost every single week I have an author on my show, and I've been doing this for almost 4 years. So, and people have written an entire book on maybe one of your chapters. And then you have found a way to take, this information and, like you said, coalesce it in a way that it's very easy to understand and experience, which I really appreciated. Yeah. So what do you think, in reading all of these different texts and doing all of this different research, if you were to kind of whittle it all the way down, what is the meaning of life?
Well, I think we have a purpose, and our purpose is the perfection of the soul, and that's our eternal purpose. That's the purpose of everything that exists. Every spirit that exists, or ever did exist, or ever will exist, has one purpose, and that's perfection. And to me, that makes sense, because if you're going to live for eternity, you have to have something to do. You can't just sit there and talk to God. You'll run out of things to say. Besides, He knows everything that you know. So you have to have a purpose. And perfection is something that, fortunately, we have eternity to reach, because it's a long job. And I don't think anybody ever gets there. Fact is, I'm sure that they don't. Because perfection is understanding all of the truths. And when you're advanced as some of the very, very highly advanced spirits, they're able to create truth. And we can't create truth. Our best efforts are just to learn it here. But maybe someday, when we get far enough down the line, we'll be able to create truth as well.
Do you feel that we have, with all of the challenges that we face worldwide here, do you feel that we should be optimistic about our futures?
Oh, absolutely. We're, right now we're fairly confused, most of us, and not really sure what we're doing here. Life seems to be out of control half the time. We live with a lot of fears, and so that kind of gets to us. But if you look at the bigger picture and you realize that we're really eternal beings, having an experience on Earth, a life experience, where we're supposed to learn something. And each one of us has a different set of issues and problems to learn. We have an experience, and those experiences teach us something. Now, what we're trying to be taught in this world is emotional wisdom. Because a lot of when you're living in the spiritual world, you don't have the emotions that we have, because you don't have fear, and you don't have vengeance, and you don't have hate, and you don't have a lot of these oddball things that you can get down here if you're living, on this earth. So a lot of times those things seem to override us, and we don't understand the bigger picture. But as that comes into focus, as our consciousness grows, and a consciousness now I use in the term of awareness, as our awareness of the truth and of ourselves and who we are and how the cosmos works and how we work, as it expands, it's much easier to have a positive view of life, and you can start seeing the bigger picture And you don't get tied down by the annoying little things in life, and that's what we live with. We go from one annoying little thing to another, it seems.
And it's interesting, too, because when we understand that we're here to learn, then we look at mistakes differently. Instead of seeing a mistake as, to be something fearful, shameful, feel bad about, it's really us it is through those mistakes that we're really just understanding and learning more about ourselves.
That's the big key. It's if we look at our mistake, that's where we learn the most. If we do something and it goes well, in all honesty, we really don't know why it goes well. We're happy that it goes well, but we really don't know. But when things go bad, you have to get into the details of it. To get yourself out, you have to go through all of the ugly little scenarios, and that's where we learn so much. And the beauty is that the mistakes that we made, as soon as we learn the lesson, the mistake is forgotten. We're never judged. And many of the religions that we're involved with, we're considered sinners and we're judged for our misdeeds. Well, that's not how it works. There is no such thing as evil, for example, only ignorance. And nobody ever gets punished for ignorance. I mean, we start out as a spiritual seed knowing nothing. I mean, we know nothing. We're a blank slate. And so we have to learn on our way. So the mistakes that we make are just our learning experiences, and then we go on.
It's interesting. I've interviewed many people who've talked about, what happens after we die. And this is something that you mentioned in your book, too, that it's not a day of judgment. It's a life review that only you make a judgment on, I guess. That there's no, judge and jury sitting there, you were bad, this was bad, da-da-da. That it's more just a review of your life, and you have the opportunity to feel what other people felt when you did things and look at your life not from a shame, guilt, you're bad, you're a sinner kind of way, but just from here was the experiences you have and what you learned. And I think that changes a lot of the fear aspect of being scared of death.
I think you're absolutely right.
You know what? I can hear the music, so I can tell this is going to take you more than 10 seconds to answer.
You're right.
So we will pick that up after the break, and then I want to talk a little bit about some of the concepts like illusion and thought and karma. When we return here, we're talking to David Gaggin, and you're listening to Entanglement Radio on the OMTimes Radio Network. We'll be right back.
Free your mind. Expand your soul. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Matt Connerton here. Join Jen Coffey and I twice a week for Matt Connerton Unleashed, a political talk show that's a little different than what you're used to. No liberal or conservative agenda here, just an honest dialogue about truth and how things really work in the world of politics. Matt Connerton Unleashed, every Tuesday and Thursday night at 11 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. Are you trying to get from point A to point B and need a little advice? Connect with the counselors at OMTimes Advisors. Whether you're looking for a life coach or a spiritual intuitive, the advisors participating at advisors.omtimes.com were carefully chosen based on their gifts, skills, and professionalism. OMTimes Advisors, connecting you with the best advisors in the business.
Hi, my name is Monica, and I'm the host of Co-Creating Now. Give yourself an opportunity to connect with your all-knowing higher self and manifest joy, love, and peace together every Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
And we are back here on Entanglement Radio with Angela Levesque. My guest again today is David Gaggin, and he wrote the book, The Endless Journey, A Unique Perspective on Mankind's Origin, Purpose, and Ultimate Destiny. All right, well, before the break, I said, you know, having spoken to a lot of people about what happens after they die, that this idea of a life review is prevalent in all of the people I've interviewed, all of their accounts. And that is something that is you talk about in your book as well. And when we look at it more as a review rather than a judgment day, that really shifts our idea of having this fear of death. And so now I wanted to let you respond.
Yeah, we have, before we have a life, we sit down, we're spirits, we're aware of everything. Matter of fact, we're much more aware than we are now. And we work with some very wise guides, people that know far more than we do. And they understand where we are in our consciousness. And we set out a life plan together. And so we go down, and when we incarnate, our job is to execute that life plan, which is to have the experiences and learn the lessons, hopefully. So when we go and we die, we review our life. And we look at it for how well we did against our life plan. And we're the only ones that suffers. If we don't do well on the life plan, nobody else suffers. Only us, because that means that we picked up some karma that maybe we didn't want to or didn't think we needed to, and maybe we didn't burn off as much karma as we wanted to. Or maybe we did. Maybe everything went very well. Usually there's a balance between the two. But the only people that it really matters to is us. It's because we have a self-directed journey towards perfection. We have a lot of help, mind you, that tells us what to do and where to go. But nobody else suffers from us making mistakes. So we end up really just judging ourselves, and then you go back and you try to digest your life, and then you some wise guides, maybe the same ones, maybe different ones, come in for the next life and say, okay, this is where you are. This is your new starting point. Because every time you have a life, you have another starting point, and then you try to deal with that.
What is the difference? You make it. Often we will use the term spirit and soul synonymously, and you say that they're different things. How would you describe that?
Yeah, I broke them, the spirit into two parts, a self and a soul. And I did it really to point out that the self is part of the divine universal consciousness. It's what gives you eternal life. And then I said the soul was what makes you unique. So I was just trying to explain a couple aspects of the spirit to show that there's a divine aspect and there's a uniqueness aspect. And that's really the main purpose and why I broke it into two.
Well, one of the chapters you wrote on is about the illusion, and I called this actually the show I called it Lifting the Veil, and that many of us are caught within this illusion. And you actually give Plato the allegory of the cave. You give his example of, and even have your own little twist on the illusion. So I wanted you to speak on that for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, the cosmos is an illusion, and it's an illusion not because it doesn't exist, but because we don't see it the way it really is. If we go out and we look out the window, and I'm looking out the window now, and I see a bunch of trees out there and leaves on the ground, and I see these forms. Well, what I don't see is the spiritual entities behind those forms, embedded in those forms. Everything that is alive has a spirit behind it. I'm not saying every tree necessarily has their own dedicated spirit, but there would be some spirit. Maybe it would be a forest. Maybe it was, maybe a big tree would have a spirit in it. But there is a spiritual world that enlivens it. It certainly enlivens everything in the entire animal world. It enlivens everything that we see. Planets would have a spirit in it. A star would have spirit. And so what we don't see is the spiritual world embedded in the cosmos. We have five senses. those five senses each one sees a very, very narrow perspective of the illusion. And they're all made to blend together to give a single perspective, a single view. But what we don't get is the spiritual attachment to it. Now, some people are better at it than others, but in general, what we see just comes from the five senses. So we see an illusion, and what we don't see is what the cosmos really is, which is a bunch of energy shaped into forms and driven by the spiritual world.
So is that part of our journey, is to see the spirit more around us? Or is that kind of why our soul picked the earth in the first place, is because everything is sort of, has that illusionary aspect to it and makes it easier for us to have those experiences that our soul is looking for?
Well, number one, the soul can pick any planet it wants, and we probably stay with one planet for a while, but there's no reason to believe that we have to be on this earth when we incarnate. There are probably 1 trillion stars out there, and most of them have planets, and an awful lot of them have planets that would work fine for spirits. So we pick, and most likely, most of the planets, or certainly many of the planets, have the same type of thing as we do here, where so you would get the same illusion if you're in the cosmos at all. But you don't need to be cognizant of what's going on. But in time, as our consciousness expands, the whole purpose is to understand ourselves and why we're here and what the cosmos is about. So our awareness will start taking in the illusion and breaking down the illusion, so we can really understand who we are, what's important, why we're here, and be able to see that the material world is here as a tool for us, an opportunity for us to experience things, but it's not the end item. We spend our life pursuing material things, and we get them, and we think it's going to be great before we get them, and then we get them, and then we want something else, and we find out that happiness is not getting the material things. It's the effort to do it that is really what gives us happiness.
Well, listening to what you're saying, and in your book, you make this case too, that reincarnation is an essential element for our spiritual evolution, which is a very widely debated topic in a lot of religions, that we come back over and over again. And that is something that we really need to get on board with if we're trying to fully understand why we're here.
Yeah. That's very true. Reincarnation, for me, was a very difficult concept to buy into. I was raised in the Episcopalian Church. Obviously a scientist, so I spent a lot of time, buying into and understanding the scientific perspective, the atheistic scientific perspective. And it took me probably a decade from the time that I first started thinking, I need to look into this, until I finally looked into so many aspects of it that I realized that it's the only way it can work, and that it's truly truth. And once I broke through that, and I call it precious notions, and we all have our own precious notions, and I had as many as anybody. But once you can get through that, once you can get to the point where you can see the world a little bit differently, and reincarnation was a key piece of that for me. And I was able to see how it all fit together. And if you're trying to perfect your soul, clearly you're not going to do it in 50 or 100 years. Well, how about the children that die at birth or something, and everything falls into place. All of a sudden, you don't have this big, mean world if you can see that over time, over lifetimes, everything evens out, and everybody gets what they need and what they deserve. And it changes your whole view of life. But I have a lot of sympathy for people that are struggling with it, because believe me, I struggled with it too. But if you look at enough places, and I put a number of things in the book to tell people where they can go and start researching these various areas to help them understand what's going on and to understand the concepts behind it. There's a lot of misinformation about it too. I mean, the religions come out and they say, well, you're going to come back to the cow or a rat or something. And that's ridiculous. You don't come back at a lower level. You come back at an equal or a higher level. Once you've reached a certain level of consciousness, you can't go back. We're on a one-way trip to perfection, and we're only getting smarter and wiser as we move along. It's a fascinating concept, and anybody that is struggling with it really needs to put some time into it, and not listen to the people that have been giving them the bad information. The other thing I found absolutely fascinating is Christianity and Islam and Judaism. They all believed in it 2,000 years ago. It was a standard belief. And Christianity, it was 453 A.D. that Justinian made a proclamation, said, I think I can control the people better if they didn't believe in it. So he just outlawed it with Christianity. It's a fascinating story, but it's something that it's an important concept. It's a really important concept to understand.
So we're up on a break in a little bit, but one thing I want to say, having, you having a religious background and then also having a very strong background in academia and science and mathematics and engineering, and in order to really hear some of the things you talk about in the book, you really need to be able to let some of, the dogma and let some of the prejudice and let all of that stuff go to be able to hear this in the spirit that it was written, because so much of that, our religious ideas and our ideas about science and all of that cloud our ability to hear this. So from your perspective, when you wrote this, how difficult was it for you to let some of that stuff go so that you could really study this material with an open mind?
Well, for the religious part, I got over that early. I remember when I was a teenager, maybe 15 or so, I remember sitting in church, looking around at the pomp and ceremony and thinking, I don't know what the answer is, but this isn't it.
Oh, there's the music. Okay, well, I want to let you finish that after the break. And also when we get back, how does this information affect our daily lives? What can we take from this and put in our lives to help us understand this and experience it on a deeper level? So we'll get to that when we return here with David Gaggin on Entanglement Radio. We'll be right back.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Have you bought into the idea that you have to work hard for your money, that business is hard? I will share some dynamic access consciousness tools to get you out of your own way so you can create a business that actually succeeds. Join me, Simone Millisers, on The Joy of Business at 4 p.m. Mondays Eastern.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Live with medium Lisa Phoenix, mediumship messages and musings, explores mediumship and all things metaphysical. Lisa Phoenix invites you to reach above and beyond your everyday experiences, to explore new dimensions in the spirit world. She will do live readings to connect callers to their loved ones in spirit, shares engaging stories and teachings from her own personal experience, and will have intriguing conversations with other mediums, spiritual teachers, and healers to help you understand the metaphysical world so you can connect to these forces in your day-to-day life. Join your host on this magical and metaphysical journey into the world of spirit every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.
Your conscious connection to a more mindful world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
We are back here in the last segment, which is always brought to you by Hestia Health. You can find out more information at hestiahealth.com, where we create calm minds, open hearts, and inspired lives. And this is the segment where we kind of bring it on home for everyone. But before we get to that, right before the break, I was asking you about how you had to let some things go because in order to study all these texts and do all this research and be able to do it with an open mind and hear things that maybe and understand things that maybe challenged some of your scientific understanding or some of your religious background. So I wanted to let you have the opportunity to finish answering that.
Yeah, I think the scientific part was harder for me to deal with because, as a young man, high school, college, I kind of believed it. They had scientific atheism was their, was kind of the, and still is the theme to a lot of mainstream science. And it took me a while to realize that, our science has a half-life of about 18 months. And in reality, science is in its infancy. And if you think of what our science is going to be like in 1 million years, I mean, the 5-year-olds will laugh at what our greatest scientists think are truth today. So, and science, they haven't found the soul yet. And there's a number of reasons for that, which I probably can't get into in the last segment here. But once I realized that these are a lot of real bright guys looking real deep into something, but in reality they can't see the forest through the trees. And it's just to believe that dumb matter, self-created, had a big bang 13.7 or 8 billion years ago, and all of a sudden formed itself into all of these highly intricate, highly dependent forms is staggering. Really, it couldn't happen. The number of miracles that you would require would be staggering. So I looked at it from a different perspective, and when I was able to let go of that really helped me in trying to figure out what was going on. As I say, I've always been a skeptic anyway. It just took me a little while to get there on science.
Well, so we've talked about some really big things, the spirit of things and the origins and reincarnation and all of that. So for my listeners, how do we take this information and integrate it into our daily lives? And if that's, you can maybe share with us how you integrate it into your daily life. How does it change the way you interact with the world?
Well, it's changed me a tremendous amount. I went, it started to come together for me maybe 20 years ago, and then bits and pieces started filling in as I went along, and I created a business, and I left the government, created a business, and used the business principles that I had learned here to run the business, and we grew tremendously. I grew the business top and bottom line 35% a year for 15 years in a row, and I was able to do that by understanding people better, understanding what was important. I wasn't chasing the almighty dollar. I was trying to do something that was the best that I could do it, and I tried to provide that environment for the workers as well. And I think that the biggest thing that people can get out of it, you don't have to go start a business, you don't have to do this thing, But we live lives of frustration. And we're frustrated about a lot of things. I mean, death is one thing that we're frustrated about. We think our life is out of control very often because things keep happening to us. And if we can realize that we are absolutely in control of our life, and we are who we are and where we are because of the decisions that we've made. But if we want to be something else, we can change the decisions that we're making and change our life. We created the world that we live in. You don't see that. You don't realize it until you sit down and think about it. And we've created the little world that we live in. We carved it out of this big world. And if we want to change it, we can change it. Nobody else can change it. A lot of times we'll say, hey, let's get the government lower taxes or give me more benefits or whatever. But in reality, the only person that can change our life is us. We're the only ones that can do it. And we're a mind. That's what a spirit is. It's simply a mind. And a mind determines whether we're happy or sad. And we have a choice. We can look at the glass as half full or half empty. But if we realize that we have a purpose, and that purpose goes on forever, and we are a much greater being than we think. And if the neighbor has a fancier car and a nicer house, it's irrelevant. Because when we go back to the spiritual world, everybody goes back with no possessions. It all starts over again. Possessions are nothing. So if you start looking at it from a different perspective, you can see yourself differently. And I think it can really help reduce your frustrations. I know people that have read the book, and I knew one woman who said that she suffered from anxiety and depression, but once she read the book and started to think about it and understand who she was, that all went away for her. So, I think it can help you a lot if you get away from the material world and start thinking about the bigger picture, change your worldview, and take control of your life. And you have the power to do that.
Well, one thing I want to say that you have a chapter on in your book as well is a way to take action on this is be in service of another. And you talk about selfless service. And I think that is a really good way, too, to connect to the energy of your message.
Exactly. When in doubt, if you're trying to figure out what to do, there's two ways to look at it. Number one, you want to do what you don't want to do, but you know is right. And anytime you're making a decision, make sure, as best you can, to have it a selfless decision, to help other people. We're human beings. We can't be perfect. Don't beat yourself up if you don't do it. Just try to be a little more selfless today than you were yesterday. And if you do that every day, you'll start making progress. You'll start feeling better about yourself.
Absolutely. And when you start to help other people, you just help yourself so much. And you don't do it from that space that I'm going to do this because it's going to be better for me, but it just happens. And you'll realize that as you help other people, and then all of a sudden it's so reflected back to you, and it just brings a deeper level of awareness as well to your own situation.
Comes back 100-fold. It's just amazing how it works out. It's amazing.
Yeah, actually, the selfless service was one of my favorite chapters in your book, because I just thought, our whole system is based on what can you do for me,
right?
And by changing that around, it really does change your life. What can I do for you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we have only a few minutes left here, so I want to give you the opportunity to share where people can find your book, your website, anything else that you'd like to leave my listeners with today.
Yeah, davidgaggin.com is my website, and you can get to my book from there. It's sold on Amazon in Kindle or paperback copy. I'm also on Facebook under David Gaggin and Twitter as well. I would love to hear from you. If you get on my website and you have any questions, comments, whatever, it's easy to reach me. There's a way to get right to my email that right on the website, and I would appreciate anybody and everybody doing that. one thing I'd like to leave you with is that you have no idea how long you have worked to get to where you are. In this life, in previous lives, it's not easy getting to where we are. You ought to enjoy it. You ought to take a minute and just enjoy your life. You have free will. You can feel bad or you can feel good about it. You might as well feel good because you're a far better person and work far harder than you could possibly imagine.
It reminds me of this quote by Carlos Castaneda. It says, "You can either make yourself happy or miserable, but the amount of work is the same."
That's exactly right, Angela.
Well, I just want to say, I mentioned this a few times, though, that your book is it really takes a middle road. It's not too woo-woo, but yet you explain spiritual concepts in a way that is very hearable to a lot of people, and as well as scientific concepts. So I think it's a great book that outlines a lot of these big things like reincarnation and illusion and thoughts and religion and spirituality. So I really enjoyed that. And I also enjoyed our time today. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you very much, Angela. I really enjoyed it myself.
All right. Well, again, you can go to his website at davidgaggin.com. Coming up next week, we have the amazing Sarah Nash. She is the blue collar goddess, also founder of the White Light Express. And you can hear her. She is the host of Radio Namaste right here on the OMTimes Radio Network. And you can hear her amazing show at 3 p.m. Eastern every Thursday. So that is tomorrow. And I am borrowing her little contest that she does that I love. And you can go to, if you can hashtag Entanglement Radio, I will, at the first show of every month, I will go ahead and make a draw, and the winner, I will give a free intuitive reading. So look for that. Coming up next on the OMTimes Radio Network is Equilibrium FM with Claire Johnson, and she's talking about living in the miracle of the frequency of love. You can find me every Wednesday at noon here on OMTimes Radio, and you can find me on Facebook and on Twitter at Hestia Health, as well as Entanglement Radio. So this is Angela Lebeck wishing you love and light. I will see you next week.